my werk se teams ingegaan en ek sit en wag en daar's niemand nie. Ek moet met my privaat teams ingaan.
Okay. Daar sê Johan, jy kan dat waar ek het die opname begin.
Okay. Get ready. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Screen fine and audio fine, I assume.
Dis reg, ja.
Okay, hoeveel is ons vanaand? Bietjie min vanaand. Maar okay, let's carry on. Yeah, good evening. I'm back. You'll see a lot more of me until the end of this course. Quite a couple of lectures still to go, but let's start off and wait, let me just fix something quickly, if you don't mind. Come on. Sorry, I'll be with you now. Okay, sorry, I just made the cursor of my mouse a bit bigger so that you can see what I'm pointing at this evening. Otherwise, you struggle. Okay, so if we recap what you did on Tuesday with Henry was oscillators. So we're just going to just recap what the oscillator is. A crystal oscillator is an electronic circuit that uses a mechanical resonance of a vibrating piezoelectric material, a quartz crystal typically, to generate an electrical signal with a very precise, stable, and constant frequency. Why this is important, if you go back quite a couple of years, the old radios that we used to have that had this little needle moving up and down a dial when we were trying to find a station. Those radios like to change frequency without you touching them. And a lot of that had to do with crystal oscillators that were not very precise and very stable. So if we look at telecommunications equipment, this is really a critical one, where the crystal oscillator is the heart of the radio. If that changes frequency, the radio is going to change frequency, and you're not going to be able to listen to what you're supposed to listen. So a stable crystal oscillator is really, it is the heart of your radio. Okay, tonight's lecture is around frequency translation. I don't know why they call it frequency translation in your textbook, but let's stick with the terminology that the Radio League decided on. So frequency translation, what it boils down to, for the proper functioning of our radio equipment on a specific frequency, we have to change or translate or move or what's the other words we can use? We need to change the frequency of our crystal oscillator to another frequency, which is where we want to listen or where we want to transmit. So the whole electronic process of taking my crystal oscillator and turning it into another frequency so that I can listen to something or transmit to someone, that is what they call frequency translation. There's various ways to achieve it. The ones which is in your textbook for you to look at is what they call multipliers. Typically, multipliers would change your frequency upwards. Let's take an example. A crystal oscillator is running at 10 megahertz. and I multiply the 10 megahertz with 2, so I get 20 megahertz. So in other words, that's up conversion, is when I change the oscillator frequency to a higher frequency than what it works at. The opposite you also get, dividers. So if I had a 10 megahertz frequency and I wanted it to be 1 megahertz, I would obviously divide it by 10 and it would become 1 megahertz. When we go through some of the slides later, this will hopefully make a bit more sense. But the big thing to remember, multipliers is typically for changing my frequency upwards, and dividers is for changing it downwards. The other method which we use in radio equipment is what we call mixers. Mixers is when we take our oscillator and we take another frequency and we mix the two together. It's like baking a cake. You take an egg and some flour and you mix it together and you get the dough that you make the cake or you bake the cake with. Mixers do exactly the same function. Takes two frequencies. It could be more, but typically in your book, you'll see mixers takes two frequencies and mixes it together, and that can be used for going up in frequency or going down in frequency. Does both ways. And then the last one we will touch on this evening is synthesizers, or also called phase-lock loops. With the dawn of the digital age we live in, you know, in your car, you don't tune radio stations by a knob anymore that moves the needle up and down some dial. Everything is digital on the screen. If you want to listen to 100 FM, you can type it in and you go to 100 FM. And that is partly, or the reason why things like that happens is because we have, in modern radio equipment, we have synthesizers that does up and down conversion for us digitally. Okay, that's tonight's things that we will be looking at. Now, before we start with mixers and multipliers, etc., we need to understand a little bit of our signals that we work with. And on the screen, there's a 1 kilohertz, well, it could be any frequency, but in this example, it's a 1 kilohertz sine wave. You can see it's a beautiful sinusoidal shape. And in the top, let me take the cursor there. So the top graph is the representation of my frequency in time. So if you look at this from 0 to 2 milliseconds, that is the behavior of my signal in time. The problem with radio equipment is it's not very useful to work in time. We work in frequencies. So the mathematicians have come up with a mathematical equation called the fast Fourier transfer function, which then changes a time frequency for us into a display which is represented in terms of the frequency. So the bottom graph is the same signal you see on top, but at the bottom it's represented in terms of frequency, not in terms of time. Why am I touching on this? Because when we start looking further into mixers, you will see we don't want neat whiskey. We want to mix the whiskey with water. We don't want straight brandy. We want to mix it with Coke, or whatever the case is. So on the screen, that is really a pure signal, which is wonderful, but it's not of much use in our radio equipment when we look at multipliers and mixers and dividers. Okay, Does that screen make sense, or is there anybody that's got a question on that screen? I think some of this you have covered already in some of your previous lectures, but I'm just going through this again. Then let's go to the next one. Now we've got a signal which is not looking so kosher anymore. In time, if you look at the top graph, in time, this frequency looks a bit jagged and a bit difficult, and it's not as beautiful as the previous one that we had. It's got all sorts of artifacts to it. But we don't know what these artifacts are. So if we convert that sine wave or that signal into a frequency represented signal, you will see now all of a sudden here is my primary frequency. My primary sine wave is sitting here. And this is what we call harmonics. And the harmonics is generated because the signal is not pure anymore. Now, when we work with mixers, we actually want these horrible teeth to stand up, because that's what makes mixers and multipliers work if the signal is dirty. Just for interest, if you remember your dB lecture, you'll see that this first harmonic or the second harmonic is sitting, let's say, at 60 dBs down from the main frequency. Now in dB, 60 dBs is already 1,000 times smaller than what my main frequency is. If you go back to your dB lecture that you had. So the difference between that and that on the screen doesn't look large, but in dBs, it's close to 1,000 times smaller. Okay, so anything that's in the radio has got harmonics, and we'll get to harmonics when we get to interference next week or the week after as well. But we need to know that we don't want pure signals. We want slightly detuned signals, or whatever you want to call that. Sorry? Sorry, Peter, I didn't hear that.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. Just talking to my son quick. I'm going to mute.
Oh, okay. So yes, that's what a distorted sine wave looks like. And then the other one, which I want to show you, is a square wave. Square wave is when we chopped off the peaks of the sine wave, and it becomes a squarish signal. So at the top again is the representation in time, and at the bottom is the representation in frequency. So my 1 kilohertz main frequency, and then the second harmonic is fairly small, but then the third harmonic is quite high. So if I want to triple my frequency of my radio, or of my oscillator, sorry, rephrase. If I want to triple the frequency, let's say I've got a 10 megahertz crystal oscillator, and I want to turn it into 30 megahertz, this signal will be perfect for doing that, because to triple, I need the third harmonic. And because this third harmonic is quite big on the screen, this will be a beautiful, nice signal to put through a tripler to multiply by 3. Where the previous signal you would use for a doubler to multiply by 2. Okay, so that's signal behavior that we need when we start looking now at mixers and multipliers. Okay, is there questions up to this point before we jump into multipliers? Okay, silence. Let's go. Now, a multiplier can be typically in a radio, it's either a multiplier by 2 or it's a multiplier by 3. It's very difficult to do more than that. It's not impossible, but it's very difficult. So you find that typically to change frequency from 10 megahertz to 200 megahertz, you will have multiple multipliers in your radio to take you up to 200 megahertz. You can't go from 10 to 200 immediately. So in other words, you can't times 100 in one go. So typically the radio equipment has either a doubler, so it times 2, or it's got a tripler. Now this one I think is in your manual. They call it a rectifier doubler. So what it does is the input signal that I get from my oscillator is looking like this. And already you can see this is not a perfect sine wave either. In other words, these points are slightly pointed. So again, I've misformed, I've distorted the sine wave coming from the oscillator just that little bit so that it makes it rich in harmonics, because the harmonics is the thing that helps me to change frequency or multiply frequency. So you can see there, it's not a perfect sine wave. So what happens is it gets applied to this transformer that's over here. And when it goes positive, okay, the first diode will conduct and will switch on the transistor into my resonance circuit. You remember your parallel resonance circuits that we did 2 or 3 weeks ago? There's your parallel resonance circuit. So argument's sake, if my input frequency is 10 megahertz, I would make this resonance circuit resonate at 20 megahertz. So my selection of an inductor and a capacitor will be such, 1 over 2 pi FL, square root. I will make this a nice 20 megahertz resonance circuit. So what happens is first peak, this diode conducts, switches on, and this thing oscillates. Let's go back. This circuit would oscillate. On the negative going cycle, okay, I will still get conduction again, but this time round, where that in time was there, the next one in time is there, and this is the net result that's coming out of my circuit. So you can already see this is half the frequency of this one. So that's the straightforward rectifier doubler that's in your manual. It changes the frequency by 2. Okay, now we look at a tripler. Again, what I put into the circuit really needs to be not a pure sine wave. It needs to be rich in harmonics so that I can have my circuit multiplying by 3. Again, same concept as the diode, except if you look at the configuration now, 1 half this conducts, the other half that side of the transformer conducts. I looked at Abby a good lift. Abby, calm down. Abby. 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 Sorry, I'm just trying to get rid of the dog. So if my input is 10 megahertz, my output frequency would be 30 megahertz coming out of this circuit. That's the tripler. There's lots of different configurations of multipliers, all operating differently, but the principles are all the same. They're either times 2 or they're times 3, whatever I put into the circuit. Okay, is there any questions on the multipliers? Okay, the next part of our puzzle that we're building towards our radio is what we call a frequency divider. Now, a frequency divider is used to take the frequency down. So in other words, if I have an input frequency of 10 megahertz, I divide by 2, so I would get 5 megahertz coming out of the first divider. I would put that into a second divider, and I will get 2.5 megahertz coming out. And you can see from the time signal here, if that's the input, every time I go through a divider, it becomes half of what was put into the dividing circuit. And this we would use typically if we want to take the frequency from a higher frequency to a lower frequency. It's one method to do that by dividing. And we'll look at dividers towards the end of the lecture again for you when we get to the synthesizers, because that's where these things really get their main advantage from. Okay, so we've done multipliers and we've done dividers. The next part of the puzzle is mixers. Mixers is really a food mixer. I add 2 different frequencies to the mixer, and I get an output on the other side of the mixer. The thing to remember with a multiplier, if I put in 10 megahertz, I would get only 20 megahertz out. Or if it's a times 3 multiplier, I would get 30 megahertz out. The same with the divider. If I put in 10 megahertz, I would get 5 megahertz coming out. A mixer gives me 2 different outputs. So in other words, let's try and explain this to you. My oscillator was running at 10 megahertz. Sorry, I shouldn't click on that. My oscillator was running at 10 megahertz. So this is what I put into the first part of the mixer, 10 megahertz. Okay. My signal that I'm trying to work with is, let's pick an example of 100 megahertz. So I'm putting 100 megahertz in this side of the mixer, and I'm putting 10 megahertz into that side of the mixer. So what comes out of the mixer is 10 plus 100, as well as 10 minus 100, or 100 minus 10, if you want to do it arithmetically correct. So I get the sum of the 2 frequencies coming out, and I get the difference of the 2 frequencies coming out the mixer. So that's one of the big differences between a mixer and a multiplier. The other big difference between a mixer and a multiplier is multipliers work in fixed ratios. So in other words, times 2 or times 3, where a mixer can work at any odd funny frequency that you can think of. So in other words, I can put into my local input, I can put 10 megahertz, but this signal could be 100.123 megahertz. And it will give me the sum of the 2 and the difference of the 2 coming out. Okay, so mixers gives you 2 components. Multipliers gives you 1 component. If we look at some signals, just to make it hopefully a bit clearer for you. So I've got 2 signals. Let's say this is my 10 megahertz signal, and that's my 100 megahertz signal. This is what typically comes out of the mixer. You can see if you follow the graph or the signal, there's a sine wave frequency represented there. So that will be the difference of the 2 signals. So if I subtract the 2 from each other, I'm going to get this wave shape coming out that's over here. If I look at the two combined, you add this one and that one together, that's this other signal that you see of high frequency there. So this is typically what happens with mixers. You have two signals and you get two different components or two different outputs coming out of the mixer. Again, to make it perhaps a bit clearer for you, this is now a time or a frequency representation of the mixer, where the previous one that I showed you, this is over time, amplitude over time, and this one is amplitude over frequency. So you can see here my two frequencies in this case was 0.75 megahertz, which is sitting here. It's 1 megahertz, which is sitting here. So the two added together gives me 1.75 megahertz, which is sitting there. And the difference between the two is 0.25 megahertz sitting there. So if I look at in frequency, it's easy. Those are my two main input frequencies. That's the difference. That's the sum. Right. Another circuit of a mixer for you makes it perhaps also a bit clearer because this one's in your textbook. They call it a double balanced mixer. So in other words, I put in my oscillator frequency on this side of the circuit. I put in my antenna signal on this side of the circuit. And over here where it says IF, intermediate frequency, I would then get the sum of these two frequencies as well as the difference between these two frequencies coming out here. Why this is a very common or a very common mixer, the double balance mixer. It gives me low distortion and it isolates the oscillator circuit, because remember a transformer is not galvanically coupled. The primary and the secondary of a transformer is not galvanically coupled. So it isolates my oscillator and my antenna from the rest of my circuitry. So it has less of an impact on my circuitry. And also, because it's the configuration of the double balance mixer, I don't get any odds and sods. If I just go back here, if I look at a bad mixer, so when I go back here, yeah, for example, this is actually a pretty pathetic mixer, but it just gives you the first glimpse of mixing, taking two signals and putting them together. So if I actually look at the real proper output, practically I get out of this mixer, this graph over here in frequency is going to have lots of more teeth in different places. It's not going to look as beautiful as this textbook graph that I've put on the screen for you. There will be lots of other artifacts being generated by the mixer. So that's why with a double balance mixer, I have less artifacts, less other components, which is not required. Practically, where do we use them? And this we will cover when we do transmitters and receivers, I think next week or the week after. If I look at a typical receiver, I have my antenna with some form of an amplifier, because remember the signal coming out of my antenna is really small, really microvolts. So I've got an amplifier and it goes into the mixer with my local oscillator here. So again, I'm mixing the antenna signal, I'm mixing it with my local oscillator signal. Now, where does, let's just look at this one quickly. This is a transmitter, same thing. I have my frequency, which is carrying all my information. I've got my local oscillator frequency. I mix the two together and it goes to an amplifier and out the antenna so that everybody else can hear me. Why we're using, just to get back to multipliers, in other words, if I want to listen to a radio station at 100 megahertz, for example, and I want this output to be 1 megahertz, okay? I need something here that can operate at 99 megahertz. And to have a crystal oscillator running at 99 megahertz is not that easy. So what they do is they run this crystal oscillator at, for example, 9 megahertz or 9.9 megahertz, and they multiply it to get to 99 megahertz. Because that's easy to achieve. To have a stable 9.9 megahertz oscillator is not difficult. So if I multiply the 9.9 megahertz by 10, I would get 99 megahertz here. So if I have a 100 megahertz signal, a 99 megahertz signal here, I would get 1 megahertz coming out here and 101 megahertz as well. The sum as well as the difference. Now, this circuit, and this is one of the reasons why I put it up for you, any mixer needs a filter. If you go back to the lecture on filters, why and where we use them, the output of a mixer, we always need a band pass filter. The reason for it being, I get the sum frequency, I get the difference frequency, and I need to reject one of them. I can't have both of them going to the rest of my circuit. I need to reject one of those two signals. So based on the fact if I want the difference or the sum frequency, I would then make a filter to discard or stop the other one from passing through to the rest of the circuit. So all these little building blocks you've been doing over the last couple of weeks should all be starting to fit together slowly but surely. Okay, so that's mixers. Multipliers, dividers, mixers. Any questions before I carry on? Sorry, I've got my back to the other screen. Just checking. Nothing there. Okay. Now we get to the modern digital era. And this looks very complex, but let's discuss it in detail for you. With the dawn of the digital age, where micros control everything, some clever guys came up with something which they called a phase lock loop, or a frequency synthesizer, some people call it as well. And all it is, it allows me to change the frequency of my, or the frequency going to the mixer or the frequency going to the transmitter. It allows me to change that quite easily and quite digitally. So what happens is I still have my crystal oscillator running at 10 megahertz, which you did on Tuesday night. I've got a frequency divider that divides it down to 1 megahertz. Now you would ask me a stupid question, why do I want to divide the 10 megahertz down to 1 megahertz? If the error of my oscillator, let's say the oscillator has got a stability error of, say, 10%, make it 10%, okay? If I divide the frequency by 10 down to 1 megahertz, all of a sudden my error of the oscillator becomes 1%. So I've got a much more stable oscillator by dividing it. And also to do phase comparison between two signals at a lower frequency is much easier than at a high frequency. So in other words, if I had to do a phase comparison between 200 megahertz signals or two 1 gigahertz signals, it would be very difficult to achieve. So twofold, I improve the error of my oscillator and it makes my phase comparison a lot easier. And when we get to the rest of the circuit, it should hopefully make sense. Okay, so this part here, which we call an adjustable divider, this is typically now controlled by the little computer inside your radio. That little radio sitting on the dashboard of your car has actually got a little microcomputer in or microcontroller unit. And when you select you want to listen to a radio station on 100 megahertz, the micro picks it up from the keypad entry that you do, and it changes this divider so that the 100 megahertz gets divided down to whatever the frequency should be. Now, in this example, it divides it obviously by 100, so it makes it 1 megahertz. If I would want to listen to a radio station on 100, let's call it 80 megahertz, much easier. A radio station on 80 megahertz at the bottom end of the FM band, the microcontroller would change this dividing ratio down to 80. So that, yeah, I've got 80 megahertz divided by 80 gives me 1 megahertz coming out. So on a phase lock loop, the input to the phase comparator coming from my crystal oscillator and the frequency coming out of my divider needs to be equal. They need to be the same. If they're not the same, the phase comparator picks it up and it says, whoa, this frequency is higher than this frequency, and it creates an error voltage. Or this frequency is lower than that frequency, the phase comparator picks it up and it creates an error voltage. Okay, so that's the principle on how it determines what is happening. It looks at that frequency coming in there and this frequency from my oscillator, and if they're not the same, I get an error voltage coming out of it. Oops, sorry, shouldn't push the button. Okay, we've got an error voltage coming out of it. I'll show you some graphs after this, but this error voltage coming out of the phase comparator is pretty dirty. And it's typically, it looks like a square wave, which is not what we want. So again, I'll put it through a filter. You can see here, phase lock loop filter. So what the loop filter does, it changes this high frequency error signal. It changes it to pretty much a good DC voltage. This DC voltage then goes to what we call a voltage controlled oscillator. And the voltage controlled oscillator will then generate 100 megahertz for me. Okay, so let's work our way around it a couple of times so that you understand. So this is fixed. 10 megahertz crystal oscillator is fixed. I divide it by 10, that's fixed. I get 1 megahertz coming into the phase comparator. This now gives me, let's go this way. I punch in on the radio's dash or screen, I punch in, I want to listen to a radio station on 100 megahertz, okay? This signal coming out here may not be 100 megahertz. So let's say it gets divided by 100 and it turns out to be 0.9999 megahertz. That 0.999 megahertz goes into the phase comparator, and the phase comparator says, whoa, there's a problem. That signal is lower than my reference signal over here coming from my oscillator. So generate a frequency error. I turn the error frequency into a DC voltage, and the oscillator goes up in frequency so that the 100 megahertz comes out. Divide by 100, and all of a sudden now 1 megahertz equals 1 megahertz. Same, now I want to listen to a station on 80 megahertz. The microcontroller in my radio tells the divider it must divide by 80 now. But now I've still got 100 megahertz coming in here. So if I divide 100 megahertz by 80, I get a lot more than 1 megahertz coming out this side. That signal that goes in here, the phase comparator says, whoa, there's a problem. This frequency is much higher than the reference. Generate a frequency error. I make it into a DC voltage and the oscillator drops in frequency. So this now generates 80 megahertz. 80 megahertz goes in there, divide by 80. I'm down to 1 megahertz again. The two are in balance and the whole loop is in harmony until I punch in a new frequency. The moment I punch in a new frequency, this dividing ratio will change. So this 1 megahertz will no longer be 1 megahertz. And this thing picks up, there's a problem, generates an error, make the error a DC voltage, send it to the voltage controlled oscillator, and the frequency then goes up or down until I get 1 megahertz coming out the divider. It looks very complex and very technical, but it's straightforward and easy. Just remember, this part is typically controlled by the little computer in your radio. And all I'm trying to achieve is this frequency, and my crystal oscillator needs to be in harmony. Like a marriage, they need to be in total harmony, so there's no error signal. And if there's an error signal, it gets turned into a DC voltage that changes the frequency of this voltage-controlled oscillator so that it is the same. Okay, hell of a lot in one oomph. Let's look at some graphs. May make life a bit easier for you. Okay, this is what I was talking about. On the top, I have the two signals, my crystal oscillator and my frequency coming out the divider. And you can see these two signals are in perfect harmony with each other. They are of the same frequency, they are of the same phase, they are a mirror of each other, these two signals. Okay, so there they are in time, signal 1, signal 2, and my output is nothing. I don't have an error voltage coming out of the phase comparator because the two signals are in phase. There's no reason for them to have an error signal. Okay, so if I just go back quickly. So this is what I'm talking about. So the signal coming out here and the signal coming in here, they are in perfect harmony, so I don't get an error signal. At the bottom is the opposite is true. You can see these two signals are not in harmony. They're out of sync. Typically, the technical term they talk about, your phase lock loop is unlocked. Okay, it's not in harmony. So I get an error signal coming out. So in time, you can see these signals are not the same, and I get an error signal that comes out. The problem with this error signal is it's not very useful for a voltage-controlled oscillator. You're going to confuse the poor guy. He's not going to know what the hell to do if you put this funny-looking square wave into the voltage-controlled oscillator. The voltage-controlled oscillator wants slow and DC values to know what it needs to do. So if I go back just one slide again, this is what the filter is supposed to do, because this error signal, you cannot put it straight into the VCO. It will get confused. It's like switching a light on and off. Is the light, there's no dim or bright anywhere in between. It's either on or off. So the VCO doesn't know what to do if I put this into the VCO. Now we go back to filters again. You go back to your lecture on series and parallel resonant circuits and filters. Here's just a very basic filter that I've put up for you to see. So the error signal coming out of the phase comparator looks like this. And after the filter, this is what my signal looks like. He actually wanted to be still a bit more smoother, but for demonstration, this is good enough. So the VCO knows what to do with this signal. Sorry, knows what to do with this signal, but it doesn't know what to do with this signal. Okay, so we go just back there again. That signal there needs to be very much a DC signal, not a high frequency AC signal. So that's a phase lock loop. It's a beautiful, fantastic device. It's it's made communication so much easier. Old radios had to have banks and banks and banks of crystals in. So for each frequency, you would have different crystal oscillators. Phase lock loops have made it a lot easier. I can now actually focus to make my crystal oscillator as stable as possible, and then use digital technology to generate my signal that I want. Okay, there we are. Questions? Gee, everybody confused tonight. Nothing. Okay. I hope I haven't confused everyone.
I have a question. Oh, sorry. Hannes, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying to Johan, I'm good. Thanks. Makes sense.
Yeah, there's a lot more you can read in your manual, but I mean, this is trying to make it for you as practical as possible when you read all that funny text in your manual.
Yeah, Johan, you didn't even confuse me. That was well brought over, and I think it was a very nice refresher.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of technicalities around phase lock loops, but I mean, it's not necessary for the exam. Well, Marty and Henry, then I'm done for the evening. I mean, the next lecture is next week when we start modulation and transmitters.
Yes. I have one question, Johan. It's not really relevant to the course, but something I think you kind of touched on here, if I may, if no one else has a question. So this Baofeng that everyone moans about, and they say it's making a noise on some harmonic when they test it and whatever. Can you explain that to me on the one slide you showed?
Yes, I can. Okay. If I look at this graph,
Yeah.
let's say this is my transmitter, my portable radio, when I'm transmitting a signal to the outside world, okay? According to the international specs and the ICASA specs in this country, this radio is technically compliant to the regulations. Although it is not an awesome radio, and I'll tell you why. The second harmonic is below the threshold of the spec, but then the third and the fourth and the fifth harmonic should have been down here somewhere in the noise. It shouldn't look, you see, these harmonics are all pretty much at the same amplitude, which is not good. They should actually, from this point, they should be going down at an angle and sort of disappear in the noise over here. Now, some of the radios, typically they give you graphs looking like this, but then the worst part of all is you get some of these Chinese radios that look like this. So in other words, if you're busy transmitting on 145 megahertz, these harmonics is so high in amplitude that you're actually causing interference to other users on other frequencies. And we'll touch on that when we do electromagnetic compatibility somewhere, where's that, 7th of April. We'll touch on that, but this is actually a pretty shitty transmitter if it would transmit like this.
Okay.
And
Thank
that's
you.
typically what you look at on a good quality radio. If the first harmonic should be around at least between 40 and 50 dBs below carrier, minimum. And then I should, from that point, just drop like quickly into the noise. You shouldn't see so many artifacts or so many harmonics appear on a transmitter. This is a bad transmitter.
Sorry for interrupting you. So if I was to buy a radio, if I'm lucky enough to steal Henry's credit card and go buy a radio, is there a way, how would I know that I'm not buying one that has that picture?
Yeah, the American Radio Relay League has got a proper accredited laboratory which they test all ham radios, Chinese, Japanese, all of them. And I permit you to download the test certificates free of, or the test results free of charge. They actually run it as a service to amateurs. But typically, FCC accreditation or CE certification doesn't necessarily mean it's a good radio. When we get to receivers, I'll touch on the topic again, why a radio is so cheap versus more expensive. A lot of it lies in the receiver and the way that they receive the signals.
Awesome. Thank you, Johan.
Okay.
So Johan, the PLL, the phase lock loop, as you just explained, is heavily used in Ethernet switches as well to time data and prevent jitter and CRCs. Basically, just useless information. I know this pertains to radios.
Yeah, look, phase lock loops is a wide topic. I've just touched on what you need to know for the exam.
Johan, ek wil nog 'n klip in die bos gooi. Jy het nou net daar verduidelik dat jou eerste harmoniek of jou tweede harmoniek is min of meer 1000 keer laer as jou fundamental. So,
Ja.
wat is die kanse, op watter afstand, hoe ver gaan daai harmonics? Sê vir argumentsondhalwe, jy's op 145-500, dan gaan jou derde harmoniek gaan sit op 436 iets. Hoe ver, want daai is teoreties 'n baie swak sein wat daar uitgaan. Op watter afstand gaan daai sein ontvangbaar is? Want as jy hier onder minus 120 dB's gaan, dan gaan die receiver dit nie kan ontvang nie.
Ja, 'n tipiese goeie ontvanger kan ontvang tot minus 120 dBm daar rond. Okay? Give or take, minus 115, minus 120 dBm. So as jy nou minus 40 dBm uitsit op jou antenna, kan hy nou gaan uitwerk die verlies oor afstand. Hoe ver sal die sein trek voor hy by 120, minus 120 kom?
Ja, want jy moet redelik, my vinnige berekening, hoofberekening sê dat tensy die ou reg langs jou staan, gaan hy nie weet van jou interference nie.
Ja, as jou harmonica 1000 maal laer is die carrier 10-1, ja. Maar hierdie ene gaan ver travel. Daar's maar 'n verskil van omtrent 10 dB. Ja, daar's omtrent 'n verskil van 10 dB. Daai sit op -5 en hierdie sit op sê maar -15. So, daar's maar 'n 10 dB verskil tussen daai punt en daai punt.
Ja, daar's 'n groot verskil. Hy gaan interference veroorsaak.
Ja, hy gaan goeie steurings maak. Hierdie ene gaan beautiful steur. En die probleem is ons sal nou kyk as ons kom ons sê hierdie is 140 MHz, né? Dan gaan hierdie presies in die middel van die in die middel van die televisieband sit. So as jy naby genoeg aan die televisiekanale is wat gebruik word in jou omgewing, gaan jy al jou bure kwaad maak wat nie op DStv is nie, want jy gaan hulle televisie affekteer.
Okay, anders sê hy gaan ontsnap. Ja,
Okay, maar ons het 'n hele aand van electromagnetic compatibility. So ek sien nogal uit na daai ene, dis 'n nice topic.
Ja, verseker. Daar is baie interessant.
Hoeveel bandwydte het 'n mens nodig om videotransmissie te doen?
Dit hang af van jou symbol rate. Op amateur televisie gebruik ons symbol rates van op tot 3 megasymbols. En 3 megasymbols is omtrent, as ek vandag moet skat, omtrent 25 meg bandwydte.
Dis nie baie nie.
Nee, dit is nie baie nie, maar as 3 megasymbol, jy moet onthou, ek kan nou nie onthou wat is DStv en daai goed se symbol rate nie, maar daai goed is iets in my kop bly klokkie van ons omtrent 80 megasymbol is hulle symbol rate. So die amateur televisie is nie op dieselfde noem dit maar kwaliteitsvlak as HD DStv nie. Maar ek sou vir jou sê op 1.5 op 1500 symbol rate kry jy mooi video's, hoor. Selfs met 'n 40-50 Hz refresh rate of frame rate kry jy redelike mooi beelde. Dis nou nie HD TV nie, maar dis goed. Dis goed. Ek kan dalk op 'n stadium as ons kyk na die digitale modus, sal ek vir julle 'n video wys van digitale amateur televisie. Ons gebruik dit op die satelliete en ja, is vetpret.
Dankie.
Dit sal nice wees.
Ja, Johan, ek dink jy kan ons vir dae lank besig hou met al die ondervinding wat jy het.
Ja, jy moet net leer, jy moet nie ophou leer nie, weet jy, ek baklei met my kinders ook heeldag, ons is geseën deesdae, ons het professor Google en Madame Bing, en hulle was awesome leermeesters gewees, en nou deesdae het AI ook nog bygekom, maar ek dink partykeer lieg die AI vir ons nog, maar ons sal maar sien hoe dit vorder.
Ja, hulle is nog nie daar wat jy hulle kan trust nie. Hulle het partymal na satellietpot mis. Maar ek het dieselfde ding vir my kinders verduidelik. Ek het vir hulle verduidelik, in my dae moes ek fietstrap biblioteek toe en dan kry jy goeders wat 10 jaar oud is. Hulle die nuutste tegnologie. As hulle nou iets uitvind in Amerika, halfuur later weet die wêreld daarvan. En hulle besef nie wat se voordeel hulle het bokant ons nie.
Ek is al besig om research te doen met Dr. Grok en hy vertel vir my baie interessante goeders ook.
Ja. Ja, ek moet net bereid wees om te leer. Amateurradio is so baie stokperdjie nou van morsekode tot van die nuutste koms tegnologie wat kommersieel gebruik word ook. Jy moet maar net leer en dit doen. That's it. Dis maar al.
Geld, tyd en kennis. Al wat jy nodig.
Wel, nie altyd geld nie. Daar's baie maniere om die goeders te doen met shoestring budgets.
Dis waar.
Okay.
Ja, daar sê ek gaan die recording stop julle. Die regte muis in die hande kan kry.
Hoorie,
Johan,
dis
baie
nog-
dankie. Ek het dit baie
actually-
geniet.
Ja, dis baie